The stronger you get, the worse your recovery will be, but not because you've been training for so long that you've gotten older and therefore require hormonal upgrades. That's the saddest, most pathetic excuse that late 20-year-olds love to falsely use to justify hopping on TRT, because they've hit their natural limit and want to feel normal again. No, the normal process is that you're now a seasoned lifter with different recovery needs. So if you think a beginner has the same recovery as being competitive worthy, then you're in for a rude awakening. I promise that everyone will hit a point where under recovery becomes the #1 cause of stalls and eventual injuries. And let me tell you, a lot of influencers you follow gave up so early they don't have a clue on what bad recovery actually entails. So let me briefly cover a couple of problems that you might encounter. And of course, know that I've personally experienced all of these. So first of all, let's discuss how bulking and becoming massive can ironically make it harder to recover in time, even though, objectively speaking, you're handling more weight and making faster gains. So how can it be that you're technically super compensating better, allowing for maximum progressive overload, but at the same time, simultaneously having trouble recovering? Doesn't that seem contradictory? Well, you have to understand that because you're in a calorie surplus, this does mean that for each training session, you're mostly refreshed. And because you're at 100%, that means you can push harder. After all, you have significantly more energy, your leverages are advantageous, and your absolute strength will always be higher at a bigger body weight or when journeying towards being fluffier. So if the workouts themselves, which generate the stimulus, are far more potent, then logically, that must also lead to a rise in fatigue. The recovery hole must be deeper than when you're eating less, because cutting or even maintaining artificially holds back your training intensity. So even if you're maximally straining the gym, if you're not bulking, your body is not in peak condition. You produce so much less force that it's harder to hurt yourself, though easier to accumulate overuse. But beyond that, most exercises feature lighter loads. You have less energy. And because you're in a constant state of under recovery, that in a sense becomes your new normal. As a result, subsequent workouts, although lower in performance, don't stress your joints or fatigue you in quite the same way. This allows you to train subjectively hard without getting hurt. And thus, you follow splits that you otherwise wouldn't be able to tolerate due to potential muscular overlap. However, in this case, the blending stimulus is not as potent, so becomes less of an issue on a weekly basis for recovery. And by the way, these are the same reasons why novices can train vastly differently from advanced lifters. The primary factor here is that the stimulus derived from higher absolute loads doesn't differ, except for recovery, which is a lot worse. This is why you cannot take benching advice from someone who presses in the low 200s, because they have no understanding of what it's like to frequently bench 3 plates and how that kills recovery. It's also why I alluded earlier about eventual worsened recovery, because until you get strong, a lot of what I said will seemingly make no sense. But one day, the bulk and experience level will match. And that's when you'll finally see the truth, which so far, every impressive natural lifter that I've spoken to has agreed upon. If you're benching 135 for 5x5, that's not the same as me doing 350 for 5x5. If you can overhead press your body weight at 160, that's not the same as doing so at 200 plus pounds, even if pound for pound strength is equivalent. If you deadlift 3 plates and say, "Oh, I love deadlifts, they're an amazing hypertrophy exercise," then you obviously haven't experienced the horrors of building up to over 6 plates and feeling how that provides the most inefficient stimulus to fatigue ratio out of any conventional exercise. In these examples, it's a comparable relative weight as pertaining to percentages, but can literally be twice as stressful. Come on. Stimulus to fatigue is above all, and although it can be difficult to quantify, you can instantly feel it. And that's why all the best natural lifters are always trying to get more out of less weight and reduce muscle damage, which I won't talk about today since it's a recurring theme on this channel, but I will mention this. Even when you're trying to get more out of less weight, at some point you get so freaking strong that regardless, you're still gonna have recovery problems. So this is the easiest form of tacit knowledge for those who actually train hard with heavy loads. Notice the specific combination. If you don't train hard but use heavy loads, recovery is in fact easier, but now you're compromising the stimulus, aka effective reps, which leads to compensation training methods that were never necessary to begin with, like in the case of prisoner style workouts or running ultra high volume programs with tons of reps in reserve and low rest intervals. Though effective when done right, it's incredibly inefficient and not foolproof, which is another massive problem, if not the craziest one. Most experienced lifters, and no, that does not include someone with 1 year lifting experience, like those seen in exercise science studies, but rather the top dogs, they understand what training to failure means. And because being closer to failure directly causes more muscle gains, it's obvious that we will be working in a close, accurate range. Most of us aim for 0 to 2 reps in reserve, and many even go all the way to failure. Now, with this occurring, because you're precisely gauging your intensity, but you come across fraudulent studies claiming that you require 20 sets a week and you try to mimic that, what do you think is gonna happen? Yeah, your recovery is gonna be fucking terrible. You can't train like these, at best, early intermediates who falsely report their RPE, which funny enough, the science also confirms. Doing so leads to a downward spiral. Then you start thinking there's something wrong with you. You start believing that you need complex periodization, waiving your RPE, incorporating frequent deloads, and so on, all to overcome the one glaring issue that's been present since day one. Digging yourself even deeper into your already profound recovery hole. Do you not see the problem? You're so strong that the absolute load itself becomes an independent recovery stressor. You train with the maximum correct intensity. You have the energy from the surplus, and you push your body to its limits, only to wonder why proper recovery is so challenging despite bulking. Isn't it clear? It took years of grinding for me to finally understand this. And even back in 2018, I was starting to question a lot of what I knew about recovery. Heck, Omar Isuf and I were suspecting that something was off before most were even talking about this. You've been deceived by weaklings who don't train hard. Or if they do, they're not big or strong enough for their recovery to match yours. Or maybe they are impressive and knowledgeable, but because they use PEDs, which alter so many recovery variables, can't trust their advice, even if it sounds legit. I'm frustrated, man, and you should be too, because many of these experts, who often have worse physiques than us, were telling us to double our fucking volumes and frequency. They wasted our time and made it significantly harder to recover. If anything, we needed an opposite philosophy. And that's the direction that my body's been leading me towards. As many of you know, I've been following the 2 sets per exercise method in order to equalize volume yet achieve higher exercise selection. This way, I can target my muscles from different angles without accumulating junk volume. It's a brilliant strategy that solves most programming issues for hypertrophy, and you can learn about it more in this video. After training this way for a good 9 months and constantly adjusting templates, I've reached a point where I never exceed 6 sets per muscle per workout. 100% of the time, it's in the 4 to 6 range. And I hit each muscle about 1.5 times a week, incorporating recovery days. It's not a 7-day split, and I'm not even training with a ton of useless sets like I used to for so long. Now, I get around 96 hours of rest with exclusively high quality workouts. And you know what? My recovery and progressive overload are golden. No negatives. I feel way less beat up and 100% ready for every single session, which enables me to push to the highest level possible. It's a 0 junk volume, maximum effort approach with optimized recovery that takes strength level into account. Boom! Constantly trying to do more is backwards thinking when recovering is already challenging enough. Instead, focus on getting the most out of your current constraints. Anyway, I'll close off by revisiting body part splits. A typical beginner can easily follow a 6-day or infinite push-pull leg split without experiencing recovery problems because they're weak, and the little muscular overlap doesn't matter. However, for advanced lifters, adopting a 3 days on and 1 day off approach or having 0 rest days will wreak havoc on the recovery in a short amount of time. I've actually tried it myself and wished I could train that way to accumulate maximum B-roll, as did Jordan Peters, who's monster strong plus also enhanced, but unfortunately, you simply get burnt the fuck out. You're on the constant edge of being recovered, and your body never gets a systemic break. a lesson that Leroy Colbert even figured out 70 years ago. The worst part is training legs a day after back, feeling fatigued as hell, only to quickly reset the ongoing rotation and still have some lingering fatigue. In reality, the backside gets overworked, and since the pulling muscles also assist in stabilization and support, when they're extremely sore and you're doing presses of all things, you can still feel them limiting you. Imagine doing ring dips or the chest crusher with destroyed biceps. This becomes a significant problem if you train back the day after your first push day, unlike an upper-lower split where both sessions are combined, ensuring equal recovery. So for stronger lifters who desire more than once a week frequency in a split fashion, you'll probably need to add one extra rest day on both ends in between leg days to completely eliminate the interference effects. I'd strongly recommend push, pull, off, legs off, repeat. This means your workout days won't have a consistent weekly schedule, but at least your recovery will be optimized. And this is the approach I'll be taking moving forward because my recovery simply doesn't allow for the conventional template. That's why earlier I mentioned training a muscle 1.5 times a week, aka following a 9 to 10 day split. Alternatively, you can combine upper, lower, and push-pull legs, which is actually how I train during my contest prep. It's certainly more crammed and can be mentally exhausting, but it is an excellent hybrid solution. And the final option is full body workouts every 48 to 72 hours, since everything recovers together and there's zero muscular overlap, which is one of the biggest benefits ever. And I think Bald Omni-Man is trained this way as well, with more than a 7-day split. So are you starting to see the pattern? If you see someone thriving on a no rest overlapping routine, 9 out of 10 times is because he doesn't train hard enough, doesn't eat enough, and or isn't strong enough, especially for his size. Because if he were near his peak, sustainability would be nearly impossible. And I don't use that word lightly. Also, I won't even dive into the topic of genetics, as I believe it becomes less relevant once you're deep into this game and training among the best naturals. Recovery, recovery, recovery. If you fail to listen to your body and just man through the pain, you're going to experience setbacks. Stop with the arbitrary moon calendar approach to recovery or avoiding real work, and you'll get new growth spurts. Be the hardest working lifter in the gym and take your rest days seriously. That's the best way to guarantee long-term progress without losing your fire. So that's it for today's video. I hope it wasn't too confusing, though I imagine it will be for some. So if you have any questions, ask in the comment section and let me know if you want a part 2 where I dive in more into the programming side of things. Didn't want to make this segment too long.